We're just going to take a look at the difference in dynamic range between the 5D Classic Mark 1 and the 5D Mark 4. Again, I've done the benchmark of the 100D with the 18 to 55mm lens. So the 100D represents, you know, crop sensor cameras, 1.6, so it could be a 70D or an 80D. They're all pretty much the same. So just to give you an idea, you might be upgrading. Well, you're thinking about going to the 5D Classic maybe to try full frame, or spending a lot of money and going to the 5D Mark IV. This is all about dynamic range. I have done another video about image quality comparing the three cameras, so I'll link at the end of this one and in the description. Okay, so let's take a look. This is a nightmare scenario for a camera. So we've got full sunlight, background's all blurry for a reason because I've actually focused on the left hand side. So the background, just a test image, we've got full sun, you can see the shadow at the top underneath the eaves of the building. We've got some really tricky colours, so we've got some reds, we've got greens. We'll take a look at that as well. But it's the left hand side we're really thinking about, because if you look at the 100D, well, look at it in years. So 2005 was the 5D Classic. Moving on to the 100D, can't remember when that was, probably about 8 years later maybe. Comment below if you know when it was. But the technology changed, and what Canon were trying to do, I think, was trying to come in line with Nikon. And they didn't really advertise this much, but when you use the cameras, you'll start to get a feel for them. 5D Classic, you tended to expose to the right and expose to the highlights, and that meant actually blowing your highlights. And they're very good at the highlight end, the 5D Classic. But at the shadow end, everyone always says there's not enough dynamic range. So I've been pulling this file around for years now, doing weddings, and I thought this would help you just to take a look at it from my point of view using the file. 5D Mark IV, completely different technology apparently. Don't know, they don't really release anything on that, but so apparently we can pull the shadow detail back, and the idea is to make an image and exposure where you don't blow the highlights, but you pull the shadow detail up. It's an interesting one. I've noticed with the Nikon D850s when people come on my courses, you know, their shadows go to black and they say, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine when I edit it. But from my point of view, doing weddings, this sort of thing, it means I'm constantly in Lightroom, whereas it'd be nice to have cameras that we can just use JPEGs like the Fujis. But anyway, that's for another day. So let's do this. The 100D is this end one. We're just going to use the history again, because I've actually pulled through these files. Well, I don't expect miracles from the 100D with dynamic range. One thing you are losing when you go crop sensor, I can tell you for a fact, is dynamic range. So a big tick box for full frame is that increase in dynamic range. So, but we'll do it and see where we get to. So first of all, I pulled the blacks a bit. That pulls the left hand side up. Pulled the shadows, there we go. So now we've got the left hand side come right up. As soon as I did that, I thought, well, it doesn't look too bad actually. Right hand side, our highlights are on the edge of blowing out. Look to the right and we've got the graph. Right hand side, we should have some detail there, but maybe we'll fix the highlights in a bit, you'll see. The shadow end is on the left. Now we've pulled the shadows up, just going back one step just to show you, if you watch the graph. So we've gone blacks, pulls that shadow detail, coming back, and then we're pulling the shadows and we're getting all of this information come through. So this was hiding, and this is what you've got to watch with just shooting JPEGs, is you're not really seeing all the information in the file. So try and get Lightroom, get yourself some raw files, start watching a few videos, and start playing about with Lightroom. It's worth, to be honest, Lightroom is worth every penny if you're a photographer. You're doing it regularly. So let's go in on this anyway and see what we've got. I remember going in on this and I expected this to be horrendous, to be honest. I wasn't expecting miracles, as I say, but look, there's hardly any noise in there. We're at 100 ISO across all the cameras, by the way. If this was 800 ISO, it would be a different story. But 100 ISO, we've got full dynamic, well, the most dynamic range, I would say, out of all these cameras. But it doesn't look too bad. So I carried on, did an exposure boost. What did that do? Brightened up a bit more. Then I've done colour noise reduction. Didn't really make that much difference, to be honest. So there isn't that much colour noise in there. With sharpening next, so we'll put some sharpening in there. And then we did the highlights. So you'll see this boost in highlights will come out a little bit. So we've gone highlights, we've recovered the right hand side. Now we're looking at quite an amazing dynamic range. I mean, the shocking thing about this is if most people would think that was their final image, and they might be using JPEGs or they might be using Lightroom, you know, and not doing this, and then thinking, wow, let's change cameras and learning the file. I mean, the advice I give out at all my workshops, people come and they're changing cameras as soon as they get there, and they might have an 80D or something. Brilliant camera, the 80D. This range of cameras, this era of cameras are really good. You have to get into the file and you have to really edit it and you have to learn about it. The reason the 5D Classic file's fine with me is because literally put thousands of images through Lightroom and I know it really well. So as you can see, this Nightmare Red, which, you know, I could see was going to be a problem, is not looking too bad. We've recovered some highlight detail. I know it looks out of focus, but look at the beams that got the subtle greys in before they were blown out. And then we recover some whites, which is taking it probably a bit too far over to a grey, to be honest, but I was just pushing it to see how far I could take it. So now that is an extraordinary dynamic range. I mean, to give you an idea, I mean, this is complete darkness, this area, really. I mean, it's in open shade, granted it's getting some light, but you know, in f-stops, if I was to measure this, I wish I had, to be honest, this is quite a range. In the zone system, if we used film, this would be way beyond what was possible. So yeah, the 100D is looking really good. Let's look at the final fix. I think we did, yeah, color temperature fix. So let's just analyze the file. It's more neutral now. White balance 4500. And this is a sharp file. There's nothing wrong with this image at all. So we're going a bit further. Yes, you've got fine noise in there, but we can't worry about that. This is pushing it to the nth degree. So that's 100 ISO. That's our benchmark. Let's move on to the 5D Mark IV. So the 5D Mark IV comes in with its strange colours. Never really understand that. Please keep commenting below if you found a fix for this weird thing where these files come into Lightroom and, you know, without presets. I mean, it's too much work. So anyway, let's go on, see what we get to. Shadows. Pull the shadows up. And then blacks again. Let's pull the blacks up, watch the graph at the end. Right, that's boosted blacks and shadows. Then we've done an exposure boost, I did. We did a highlight boost. Sorry, not a boost, but a recovery. So again, we've recovered highlight detail. Nothing magical compared to the 100D. Got a bit of chromatic aberration there. So that's quite interesting. Let's just go back to the 100D. It's amazing what you see as you go along. Let's have a look. Yeah, we've got some there. What I'm going to do, because we're in the middle of this, is just come down and I'm just going to look at what we're doing. Here we go. It's because these aren't ticked. Let's see if we can get rid of that purple fringing. Might not. No, it didn't actually. So yeah, the out of focus backgrounds with the 24 to 105 f4.2 lens. It's just done its fix then actually. It's not horrendous, but there was some chromatic aberration there. Let's keep going because we're on dynamic range. That's pretty much it. Let's go in on the file. We've gone in a little bit further. You will see, I mean, there's a reason you're spending £2,500 or whatever on a 5D Mark IV. You will see better dynamic range. There is. Is it life-changing compared to the 100D? Not that, from what I can see, to be honest with you. What you are getting is a slightly cleaner shadow detail as far as colour's concerned. And it is there. I've seen landscape photographers doing this where they literally, you know, their landscape looks black and then they'll expose for the sky and their highlight maybe a cloud. And they'll pull all the detail back. I've had concerns with that, but you know, I can see it works. D850 Nikon, That's what everyone's been doing. I haven't been in this world. So yes, that's my new workflow for weddings, which is a bit odd. So it's completely different. I'm exposing really and completely differently. Probably not worrying so much about exposure, to be honest with you, at weddings as much as I am with a 5D Classic. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, so I think actually trying to get a good exposure slows you down slightly, but probably makes you a better photographer. So anyway, so we've pulled it all back. Compared to the 100D, you can see we've got some pinks in the 100D. We've got slightly off colours as well with the 100D. The 5D Mark IV is holding up really well. So, and the colours of those very tricky reds, I know that red quite well. So it's doing really well. Final one, 5D Classic. Now in theory, you know, everyone's going to think this is going to be the best thing in the world because that's why I'm doing this video. I'm not doing it for that reason. It's just interesting to me to see why I've used this camera for so long. And you're about to see why. So let's boost the shadows. Here it comes. Boost the blacks. That's fixed our graph. So we've got some noise reduction I did some colour noise reduction. We've still got this pink, by the way, here, which is interesting, the same as the 100D. Let's flick back to the 100D. We've got this pinkiness. Our colours are looking okay. Let's go. 5D Classic, we're on it now, and I've done exposure boost. Then we've done highlight recovery, and you know, this is fine on the 5D Classic because the subtle details in the dress, no problem. We don't appear to have a purple fringe, which is interesting. Didn't even spot that when I was doing these. So we haven't got it ticked over here, remove chromatic aberration. Tick it anyway, let's enable the profile. And that's just fixing the file. Struggling because I'm making a video. This is a new MacBook M1, just to let you know. It's the MacBook Air actually. I'm pushing it to its extreme at the minute, but it's doing all right. Yeah, so we've got this pinkiness. We've got to the end there. So let's flip between the 5D Mark IV. That's 5D Mark IV coming through now. We've still got a bit of pinkiness here, and you know, let's go in on it. So we've got some, you know, the 5D Mark IV, I have to say, for dynamic range, it is the winner, no matter what, I can tell you, but it's not by a mile. Let's go in on this 5D Classic file. Now you'll see more detail, and this could be me not focusing accurately. I did spend, you know, very little time doing these, I have to be honest with you. I probably focused on this area, but there's not really much noise, and this is 2005, so 2022 we are now. 5D Mark IV is still the 30 megapixel camera on the Canon website. We'll forget the R system for now, for there has been an improvement there I've seen with dynamic range and noise, but it's another day. 5D Mark IV compared to 5D Classic, yes, definitely you're seeing some benefits there. Are they massive? No. And to give you an idea, I said this in the last video, you could pick up a 5D Classic for $200 maybe, $300. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And that's why I've kept using the camera. There was nothing wrong with it in the first place. Now, as an ending to this, what I just want to say to you is, this is me just mucking around with cameras, but I have put a lot of images through that 5D compared to the 5D Mark IV, very little. So it's early days with the 5D Mark IV. I've done a wedding with it. I've got a wedding at the end of this week. I'll keep going with it. But it's nice to be being able to match the files up. You know, these aren't that far off between the 5D Mark I, and look at the reds. You think after all those years, and we've got all the profiles, the different Lightrooms, everything that's going on. And if you just watch the reds between the two, honestly, on my screen, this is a 4K, properly white, you know, properly calibrated screen. Literally, you think they're exactly the same. There's very little difference. I'm using the Adobe color profile there. Granted, when you go over to the 100D, we've got different colours, and just expect that. You are in a different world with the crop sensor. There's nothing wrong with them. The best thing you could ever do is just learn how to use Lightroom and RAW files if you've got the crop sensor. Same with any of the cameras. But as I say, if I was to choose one image for dynamic range, it would be the 5D Mark IV. I want to take a look at that chromatic aberration. It appears to have gone now, look. I think it was just Lightroom catching up actually with the profile. So that's gone. Yeah, so it's not massive. And just bear in mind, I've pushed this from full daylight, 100th of a second, f11 at 100 ISO. So that will tell you how bright this day was. I mean, that's full sun in June through to the darkest day, well, not the darkest, but open shade coming in. I mean, this has got to be 14 stops easy between here and here. So they've both done really well. They've all done really well. I would not push a 100D this far. This is not a normal. You'd probably take this photo, take 3 photos, and you'd combine them. So yeah, the 5D4 is looking really good. We'll leave it there for now. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments. If you've got your own opinion, put them in the comments. Definitely 5D Mark IV. I'm interested in anybody that has used this camera for the past 5 years. Let me know, because I'm trying to get on top of it. So we'll leave it there. Have a good day. See you again soon.